It is my honor to introduce the Industrial Light and Magic Effects Supervisor, who's won 2 VES awards for War of the Worlds and The Irishman, who's also been nominated for 3 Academy Awards and 2 BAFTAs. Please welcome Pablo Helman. Also joining us is the 5-time VES Award nominee and ILM Effects Supervisor, Robert Weaver. And our third panelist is Academy Award winning and BAFTA winning, a winner for Gravity, as well as 3 VES Award nominees, ILM Animation Supervisor, David Shirk. Well, wow, guys, that was amazing work, right? Wow. I want to thank you guys all for taking the time to be here. I guess I'll get started with, what did you guys know about Wicked before you started on this adventure? Had you seen the show?
I had seen the show in the beginning of 2000s when it started, so it was a long time ago. And then when we started production in London, we all the production people went to see the production, and that's about it. I mean, it's funny because this is my first musical, and the script. You know, I'm used to descriptions in the script where you this is what you see, this is what we produce, and there was just basically a song. There was really nothing there. So I was wondering what it was that we were going to to see. And John Chu, the director, he doesn't like previs that much. He feels like it kind of like locks him into something, and so I wonder how we're going to come up with the images. And so we started having meetings in London with the production design, little models with all the sets. There were 17 stages, and the models, there were little models in there, and John started pointing things, and we recorded those meetings, and that's how we came up with the images.
So there's so much to talk about in this film. Every shot, 2,200 shots, and 1,000 artists working in a number of vendors, correct? I mean, every shot had visual effects, touched it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it's a real blend of practical and CG. What challenges did that present, and how did you guys overcome them?
Go ahead. You had the challenges, so.
Well, a lot of the times we were tasked with having to create establishing shots, right? And it would have to be built upon a design language that was set up on the day of shooting. And so we had to take that and extrapolate it and then add a certain element of enchantment with the scope and vastness that is necessary to create the Land of Oz, essentially. So that brings its challenges. It was certainly fun and a very collaborative process that was enjoyable, yeah.
So there were, talking about the animals, you guys, there were a lot of animals in this show. And animals grounded in animal behavior and look, yet behaving with human characteristics as much as you could. And starting with the birth scene, where you have the midwife and the nanny are both animals, and the nanny being a giant bear who, without your treatment, could be thinking they was going to eat the child. So how did you approach the animals, and how did you make that blend of animal behavior and human behavior?
That went back starting pretty much at the design phase. We had this scene where a baby was being delivered basically by predator animals. So it became this challenge to make the animals realistic and believable, but still appealing and non-threatening. So Dulce Bear got a lot of subtle adjustments. You know, her face got a little more squished, a little bit cuter. We spent a lot of time thinking about eyes, and then when it came to the performance itself, we started, as we always do, with a huge amount of reference, and we figured out, well, what does a bear look like when it walks on 2 legs? What does a bear look like walking on 4 legs? How can we make this bear feel like it's contributing while it's walking around on 4 legs? John had us trying a lot of things, and he had very specific ideas about what he wanted with the way the animals moved. So, for instance, when you reference a bear walking around on 2 legs, they look way too comfortable doing it. There was a thing that went viral last year. There was a bear in a zoo, and everybody swore it was a person in a costume. Bears are surprisingly adept at walking around on 2 legs. So we had to intentionally make her way more awkward in the way she moved so that it was believable and we had this sense of weight. But it was always about her being soft and about her being nurturing. We had to make a lot of small adjustments. You know, bears can't twist their hands around. Bears don't have an opposable thumb, and we had to make those kinds of adjustments to the reality of the animal. And then Robert's team spent a huge amount of time just, let's make the fur look really soft and plush, and let's make the lighting really ideal and romanticized. Let's watch out for the claws, and the teeth could be shortened, and all these things that we did very subtly to keep her believable, but still fulfill the role she had to fulfill in the movie.
And that sequence specifically was very fairy tale-ish, you know, in aesthetic. And so just a couple of things that nobody really knows is that sequence is actually on film. The whole movie was shot digitally with an Alexa 65. But throughout the process, we started looking at visual effect shots and thinking, you know, how can we make them more fairy tale-ish and a little bit more organic. So we did a test at Photocam, and we filmed out the finished shots after we DI'd them, and then we rescanned them into the movie. So that complete sequence is one that is completely on film.
And I remember when that shot or that sequence was initially turned over, something that stuck with me that John had characterized. He said, "I want it to be endearing," right? And so that lends itself to the performances David was talking about, the rendering aspects, the lighting, the compositing work, all can be factored in when you're trying to keep that common goal of endearing quality to it.
Yeah, a big adjustment for us was doing the opposite of our typical inclination, which is to keep everything very subtle and grounded and don't draw attention to it. And John wanted the performances to be big and theatrical. When the animals sang, he wanted them to be really expressive like they were on stage. So fortunately, we had a lot of singing actors in the movie that we could model off of. But that was a stretching thing for us to try to go to that place where everything was sort of theatrical and overstated. But we all started to learn to love the word delightful, because when John said something was delightful, we knew we'd kind of hit the mark for him.
And Dr. Dulleman, that scene, it was so full of emotion. How did you said you had an animal unit? What did
An animal unit, yeah, it was about 15 people that just behave like animals. So on set, and they would walk like animals, and they also learned the songs and also learned the dialogue. So the actors had something that they could interact with, It was interesting because John had never done something like that, and it was really important that we were on set, as you know, with somebody there that also we can shoot a shot that goes into the edit and holds the edit together. And that's something that they hadn't thought about. Generally what happens is that, there's a creature there, I'm going to put it in CG, let's move on and shoot something else. But that person gave us some humanity to it, because the challenge there for animals is that you don't want to make them, completely stylized, but they're animals.
So part of the practical effects was a lot of stunt work, and in The Wizard and I, and in Defying Gravity, that's very obvious stunt work on her part, and you had to enhance that. What was that challenge like?
Well, that sequence, Defying Gravity, started again with a model and John with a little stick and a little alphabet right there, and moving it around, and then we all kind of like, well, how are we going to do that? Because the only thing that was going to be built is basically the tower, the balcony where this interaction happened. And Cynthia is a very organic kind of actress. She wanted to be painted green. She wanted to do all the stunts, and she wanted to be in front of the balcony because she was singing to somebody. So the stunts were there, and there were all kinds of wires and just machines to move around, and so it was really important for us to get at least the gravity that happens on the face while she sings, especially in close-up work. But the bodies were pretty much replaced because she had a kind of a metal rig around so that she could rotate in the middle of it. So the bodies were replaced. The other problem there was the cape that we couldn't put in there because of the wires. So the cape was a character, that had to act, and also, as you probably noticed, it grows throughout the sequence. So and that was something else that we didn't know if it was going to work or not. It was something that the last shot, when she does that work right, actually didn't come together until, a few weeks ago. Because we didn't know. We wanted to, basically, if you went to see the play, you know that at the end of the first act, she lifts and then the cape stays down. And so how do you do that? So I think it worked. And one of the reasons why it worked is this kind of spiritual or religious, references that we got. If you actually take a look at some Renaissance, shots of Jesus, in the middle of all these incredible clouds, and that was the idea, that she was becoming something else. And so, yeah, that's what it was.
And animating to music, that must have been an interesting challenge.
Yeah, it was especially when we were heavily involved in the design of the shots. The opening shot of the movie was in production since pre-production. I mean, we did a couple of previs passes, and then, like Pablo says, then we got into the nitty-gritty and we went through a lot of versions. I think we did somewhere between 12 and 14 versions of that shot to get to where we landed. And it was all usually about taking space out of things and tightening up the action. And all the things in the shot had to happen on really specific musical beats. And John was like, this is where this happens, and this has to be right at this moment. And of course, if you shift anything in a giant shot like that, where you're following flying monkeys around a castle, anything you move, everything around it has to topple like a house of cards, and you have to rebuild things around it. So it was really challenging to have everything hitting at the exact right musical moments. And then, of course, we went through another loop when we went back for reshoots. We had to synchronize the witch hunters at the top of the waterfall into our revised camera move, and that had to be reshot. And then we had to rework the actual digital shot around that element. So yeah, it was a real challenging to work through that stuff and just to have all that action hit on the exact moments without feeling like you were dragging or accelerating too much.
And to add to that, I would say that the cape, as Pablo mentioned, is kind of a character on its own, but a big part of Elphaba, and that having the cape be choreographed given that it's a cloth simulation, is no small feat. And the team down in Sydney did just a bang-up job in being able to hit key points in the performances that David was speaking to that needed to be hit, but still maintain the fluid, realistic nature that needed to happen.
It's a difficult thing to explain to the director. Well, you're doing this in computer graphics, right? Could you just redo? I like this part of the scene, but I don't like this other thing. Well, we have the same problems as the practical. That's why we didn't do it practically, because we couldn't do it. So a simulation is a simulation, and it always comes up with something completely different. So so it was a challenge, but I think we all now we're ready to do part two. So now we know exactly what goes into it.
So the show is epic, and it's also very intimate. How did that inform some of the visual imagery, especially in the ballroom scene, the lighting, and other moments?
Yeah, I think that you can see it also in the ballroom scene. In the band is always emulating what the actors are doing. But you can see it also in the transformation, in the monkey transformation, because a lot of what the monkeys do is based on what the actors are doing. You can see some of the this cute thing that Ariana does with her nose that I can't do, but you can see a little bit of that in the monkeys. Did you look at that one?
Oh yeah, definitely. Developing all of the monkey performance for that scene was a huge part of what we did with John in the post shoot process, because we had great reference of Robin and his team performing and standing in for the monkeys, and it gave us the basic foundation for a lot of the physical performance. But for John, it was all rising and falling based on what they were doing facially and how they were responding, and he was still kind of figuring out, how does Chistery relate to Elphaba when she's reading the Grimoire and this thing is about to happen. So we had to go through a long process with John, and eventually we figured out that the best way to work was to actually shoot a bunch of stuff and show it to him. I mean, we do that as a regular part of what we do for animation, but animators are not accustomed to doing camera acting. That's a completely different thing, where basically they're sitting there with a close-up on their own face and now just react to things. And I had to give them a crash course. I said, it's not about how you move. It's like how you're thinking about something, and it has to come through. So over and over and over, we were just shooting and shooting and shooting all this stuff. And then I would send a bunch of it through to John, and he wound up cutting with a bunch of it and saying, yeah, that's what I want the monkey to do. And that went really well. It really helped us to kind of work with him to find what he wanted, because it was a difficult process to arrive at what all that was going to be.
It was very successful. That transformation scene was agonizing. And the feathers. So can we talk about those feathers?
Yeah, there were a lot of them. There were like
5,100 feathers
yeah.
on Chistery. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's something that the feathers was something that came up later. That's one thing that I realized working with John. Is like he was shooting he's a performance person. So he was shooting the performances, he was shooting the singers, he was shooting the backgrounds, but we didn't know a lot of other stuff. So when we were doing turnovers, there's a bunch of feathers. I'm sorry, what was that? Where did they come from? Well, they come from Transform. Yeah, but you have to be careful that it's not horrific. It's a mitigation. It's a transaction throughout the whole thing. But I think that one of the things that we found out is that John wanted this atmospheric, thing about the show that we didn't shoot. So we had to put it all in, all the petals, all the flowers, all the smoke going through.
Dust and God rays.
Yeah.
Atmospherics.
A lot of simulations in this.
Yep.
In this movie.
Yeah, and that's one thing that the director had to get used to. See, he got what. Be careful what you wish for, because then you're going to have to wait for it.
Yeah, as far as the simulations that you just mentioned, if you take a character like the monkeys or the bear, you've got muscle simulations going on, you've got skin simulations going on, cloth simulations, fur simulations, feather simulations. I mean, it's never ending, and they all have to complement each other. So that's an involved process.
I think one of the things that I see in directors too is that what is it that they're approving, and because of visual effects, it's always contrary to filmmaking in a sense, because we have artistic needs, but we also have financial needs, and so we have a specific approval process, and the director will always say, well, I approve this, but this doesn't, you render this thing, this doesn't look like that, so now we have to go back and change it. I'm sure you love that.
Yeah.
That may have happened once or twice.
Yeah. To ease that, though, we came up with a way to present the animation performance that we call sneak view, which was essentially animators were turning around fur renders, minus the simulations, of course, but it gave John a much better representation of what the shot was going to look like. So I think that was a big win.
Yeah, it's a diagnostic tool that we had been using at ILM already, and we found that by doing a little bit of additional work on it, it worked in shots, and we could actually use that to present, because up to that point, there wasn't really a good way for us to say, well, here's a furred animal acting, and this is exactly what it's going to look like, because the first couple of animation passes, when you have a creature that doesn't have any of its fur showing, you get a real surprise when you see what the next version looks like.
And so the epic proportions of this film, the incredible environments, I know a lot of them were partially practical, but I know you guys are involved with creating a Munchkin Land, the Shiz University, Emerald City, and the tulip and barley fields. And in the barley fields in The Wizard and I, she was actually interacting with CG barley. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, there was a real effort to plant barley, but the problem is that, well, for one thing, she did a first take and she fell down because she couldn't run through. You can't run through barley, but nobody had thought of that. So then we had to wait 2 hours for it to be, after months of planting it, just cut it out. And then what happens is that because they took 3 or 4 months to grow it, once you crane the camera up, you can see all the irrigation. So all that has to be replaced. But the effort was there, and the tulips, yes, there were 9 million tulips, but they were planted about 30 miles away from the set. So, and also in the establishing shot, the tulips, they go down in a bowl, and that's something that was introduced later. So all that stuff had to be replaced. But for some shots, it was great because the kids were running through the tulips. That was great. The tulips in the background for Munchkin Land were also created in visual effects. But the real estate was there. And it was great for the actors to see that and to act to that. And then you want to talk a little bit about Emerald City and sharing the asset between Framestore and ILM?
Yeah, we had a couple high-wide establishing reveals of Emerald City with the train entering, the first shot of the movie with the camera creeping up over the edge. And again, that was kind of drawing reference from the original set design and embellishing upon that. And poppies played a big part, both in color, texture, for giving the feel of enchantment around Emerald City. And then the build of Emerald City itself, again, practically built a lot of amazing sets that stopped at a certain height and then had to be extended beyond, and we had to come up with what the look of the overall city from a high wide would be and what that architecture looks like and how it all fits together. And it had to be built in kind of a modular fashion so that it could be dressed to camera, so that at times you're looking out a window and the building isn't compositionally ideal, and so you want to scoot buildings over or replace a tower here and there, things of that nature. And it required a lot of back and forth because Frame Store was also building their version of the city as well, and so we had a lot of cross collaboration with Emerald City and keeping both of us on the same page as to the look and the design of that.
And the sets were built, interior work was built 25 feet. So after that, then we took over. And exterior was 55 feet. And after that, then we took over.
Wow. I noticed there was an army of compositors on this show. What were some of the biggest compositing challenges?
Well, I would say that as time goes on, it does not get easier for compositors. It gets more and more complicated. So we tend to give them an array of elements to work with and problem solve to create a final composite. And a good, for instance, would be when we were doing shots of the train or various parts of the city or whatnot, there were different lighting schemes that were rendered, one to match one-to-one to what was shot practically, and then one to match a more elaborate kind of fantastical, brighter sky, things of that. And then we would give compositing multiple versions of the same thing and then say cohesively you need to fit these together so that it can fit into the plate but still have this magical feel to it. So my hat's off to the compositors.
So it's, last line of defense, because especially when you have, a creative kind of thrust that moves things around and it pushes towards the end. But knowing that, I mean, everything in lighting has been done a lot more flexibly, and the animation also.
Yeah. One of the places I think where there's a lot of work that kind of goes by that we might not actually even realize was there was in Defying Gravity, because while Cynthia was on a rig and on wires, she was typically shot pretty static. And in the shot, she was moving great distances through reflected light and shadows, and so it had to be embellished on top of the lighting that existed from set. So there were two different lighting rigs. One actually matched what was shot in the studio, and one was an environmental rig that showed the effects of the sun and shadows. And then the compositors expertly blended all this stuff together, even down to light passing over edges of her face, and there's also a lot of contamination from set lighting that would go across her that had to be matched and motivated coming from the sky. It was a real puzzle putting all that stuff together.
And there were some there was a lot of combining shots.
Yeah.
We would shoot different parts of the song. And so to your question about the music, that also is a problem because she's also singing. And so if you're going to mix between two shots, you're going to have to make her sing, and everything has to sync up. So there are some shots in there at the end that were like 3 shots, different ones that were basically started with the A side that was shot, then the B side is digital, and then the C side is back to a shot that was shot in close-up.
And of course, almost never the same lens on the shots.
Right.
There was a lot of lens changes.
And then the lighting changes. So anyway, it was a real treat, really, to figure this one out. It was kind of a puzzle thing. That's why I'm always amazed with people that put puzzles together, because this is exactly that.
I noticed there was a lot of camera moves and a lot of complex camera moves, like 360s. What kinds of challenges did those present? And was there ever a time when you had to say to the cinematographer and the director, that's not going to work for us, or did you just figure out ways to do it?
No, because I have a mortgage, so I don't say that because our job is to figure out what how to do it, and the earlier you are into the what it is that is wanted, the more you can influence the way the methodology for shooting it, and you can cheat a little bit, and you can say, well, I can't do that, but I could do this, or you just go for it, and if you're a religious person, you're fine.
What was the hardest scene, camera-wise?
Well, defying gravity was really difficult. Yeah, Tarak was really difficult, and mainly because of eye lines and crossing the lines, and it was the whole thing. It was just a blue screen, just that we had, and then that's it. We had to create everything else. So that's difficult, but it was fun.
Yeah, there was there was the falling scene outside the tower is a good example. Anthony Smith, who's our visual effects supervisor in Sydney, oversaw that with his layout artists, and they would go through and work all the shots because, of course, she was falling 5 times the distance of the actual tower height. And they would work it out to say, okay, in this shot, she's passing this building and then this building, and the idea of giving it a believable progression, even when it went into super slow motion. But you always kind of felt that she was falling continuously, even though frequently she had to cover almost the entire length of the tower just for one shot. So that's a credit. That's a credit to all the versioning they did on that, and there were a lot of presentations along the way to John to say, well, this is kind of the breakdown. Here's how does this work, and you'd say, I want to see a little more of this in the background here, a little more of this here, and it was really just this trial and error of figuring out how to make the progression of some of those sequences work.
There was that shot of when Alphaba comes to camera and then falls away from camera. That was really difficult because the camera is not doing, when we're shooting her, then it's not doing the right thing, and we want the background to do a specific thing. And that's a typical shot that she had to hook into a far away shot, and that wasn't part of the original photography.
Two shots. One was above the city, and one was next to the city, and we had to link them into a single shot.
Yeah, match all the animation, and yeah.
Difficult.
Yeah, and the simulation artist definitely had some bad moments working on that shot because she just plummeted an impossible distance, but it worked visually. So they just had to figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean it was a challenge in dailies too. It's why does he do that? Well, because she's traveling at 700 miles an hour. Well, but she's not. Well, she is actually.
So with that many shots and that many vendors and that many artists, how did you supervise them all and keep the look so consistent?
I think well, you work with incredible artists and at ILM and also in frame stores. Artists, they're great. So you just make sure that everybody's is filmmaking. So you're looking at what happens before in your sequences and what happens after, and you give as much information as possible when it comes to content, so that people know what they're doing. Otherwise, you're just doing something that doesn't connect to anything. And I think you have a lot of people that are very anal about a bunch of stuff, and so especially color and things like that. And so everybody's paying attention, and I think we all try to empower the artists to take a look at their work and point out differences and things that they could do to make it better.
Yeah, the artists are never secluded just on the shot that they're working on. We always encourage to look at the shot in the context of the sequence, get the feel of the sequence under their skin so that they understand, continually running out contact sheets with every shot depicted so that we have cohesion across the sequence, things like that.
We had the DP generally in dailies, and the editor and the director in visual effects dailies. So there's always kind of the more the merrier kind of thing, and this is something new that I hadn't seen before. But what it does is it makes it all together, because we all have different needs and different ideas and we're hired to do different things. And so sometimes the editor will say something that I didn't know that was happening, and that helped, create a better visual effect shot.
So one of the other things that was very impactful was the attempted balloon escape. How much of that was practical? How much of that was you guys?
The basket was practical, but that's it. Yeah, and also the problem was that that tower was not built as a tower. It was only 25 feet, and so there were 3 towers in different 25 feet sections that we had to put together. So we had to figure out where to put the camera as the camera was moving around. But structurally, that sequence took us to defying gravity, because we needed to have a way to get up there. I mean, they could have just taken an elevator or something else. But the idea was that, okay, well, we have a balloon that is part of the story. If we blow the balloon goes up, and then structurally, we're going to get up, and the story will keep moving. So this is a typical thing about using, the story to be part of the visual effects.
And part of the story, it was told by the skies. The skies were a big part of the storytelling. How can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, go ahead, because it was a real problem.
Well, the skies, yeah, we definitely entertained a lot of different options to the skies. And I remember conversations in Wizard and I sequence when Elphaba is running through the barley fields, and that, when it was shot on the day, it was a very overcast day, or series of days there, and you have to go with that, because you can't just reschedule a shoot based on the weather all the time. So that didn't fit for the overall feeling that John wanted it to be hopeful. He kept using the term hopeful in that sequence. And so we would try different skies that would have a tremendous amount of scope, but still be able to tie in to the original plate. And to tie back into what David was talking about earlier, we've gotten better and better continually at being able to provide that integration when we change an environment from what was originally shot through a series of relighting, if you will. Again, leans on the compositors to make that happen. So in that Wizard and I sequence, we had to play with her original lighting, which was flatter, and make it a little bit more dramatic to fit into the nature of the sky that was chosen for that. Generally speaking, the skies, just John wanted a sense of grandeur and scope, and that's what we landed on.
And then defying gravity also, towards the end, when it becomes his painting, the Sydney office did a great job, with Anthony there, just bringing that around, and it doesn't start like that, but it ends like that.
So we're in our last 5 minutes, and Pablo, I know you have to go so you don't get a divorce. So I just ask you, favorite moment, the thing you're most proud of in the show. Do you have a moment or just something overall?
I think for me, that sequence, the Osda sequence, when we didn't know she was going to cry in the middle of the sequence, and we were like 500 people on the set. There was no music, so she does this thing, and it turn around, everybody's crying. But if that sequence didn't work, then defying gravity wasn't going to work. And so for me, just taking a look at how the last 45 minutes of the movie just take you there to that shot, the last shot of the war cry, it was great.
I think for me, my favorite was probably the birth scene. You know, trying to make that reality happen in such a way that it was believable, right, and still had a certain level of whimsy to it, of course. But you've got a singing bear, you've got a wolf delivering a baby. Trying to make that feel natural and real. I think that was
And the first time we see her powers, which
Exactly.
escalates throughout the whole movie.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't always get the opportunity to work on something where that evokes such strong emotion. I mean, it does for me. It's a treat when you work on something. You know, you're sitting in dailies. You're like, don't get emotional in front of the team. Come on, but it's that kind of stuff. And it's like Pablo says, it's a little hard. It's a little hard to resist. And yeah, it's a real gift to get to contribute to something like that. And for me, you know, the satisfaction was being able to work with John and help define some of those performances and help support some of those moments.
Well, I just want to thank you guys. You guys should be so proud, don't you think? I mean, amazing, amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. You made me cry and scared the pants off me a few times. Thank you guys all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.